Hey folks, welcome to the Tech Rack. It's Jordan here, and today we have Samsung's most premium and their flagship phone, the S23 Ultra. In this video, we'll take some time to unbox the phone and I'll be able to show you what's inside, and I'm hoping to share some features that I actually prefer and even dislike over the iPhone 14 Pro Max, which is this phone's direct competitor. I've never personally owned a Samsung or even an Android phone, in fact, ever, so hopefully this will be a treat and I'll gain some understanding of why folks don't choose iPhones in the market today. The S23 Ultra released back in February of this year in 2023. It released alongside all of the Galaxy S model phones, starting with the S23, S23 Plus, and also this one, the S23 Ultra. This phone is Samsung's largest S model phone that we have in the market today. And I mentioned previously that its direct competitor on Apple's side is the iPhone 14 Pro Max. This is simply because of two reasons. One, it's got a large display like the Pro Max, so this S23 Ultra has a 6.8-inch display. And second, it has all the bells and whistles on a smartphone. The S23 Ultra comes in 8 colors. 4 of those colors are only exclusive to Samsung's website. So the main ones are Phantom Black, which we have here, Cream, Green, and also Lavender. Exclusive colors are Graphite, Sky Blue, Lime, and also Red. The S23 Ultra comes in 3 storage options. It starts off at 256 gigabytes, works its way up to 512, and then finishes off at 1 terabyte. Pricing for the phone starts at $1,200 for the 256 gig model, and it works its way up to just north of $1,600 for the 1 terabyte model. The 256 gig model comes with 8 gigs of RAM, while the 512 and the 1 terabyte comes with 12. If you're looking to use this phone for multitasking or high graphic intense applications, then definitely settle with a minimum the 512 gigabyte model. This phone now uses Snapdragon's new 8 Gen 2 chip, and it actually has exclusive SKU dedicated for the S Galaxy models, so the S23, 23 Ultra, and also the 23 Plus. Before we get started on the unboxing, I'd really appreciate if you could like this video if you're enjoying what you're seeing so far, and even subscribing to the channel so that you can stay tuned to future videos as well. All right, let's unbox. All right, folks, I'm back. I've tested this phone out for a couple days now. It's all set up. I've added the apps that I like to continuously look at each and every day. So I've had some time to figure out what I like about the phone and what I don't. The S23 Ultra has a 6.8-inch display. It's pretty tall, it's very thin, and is somewhat heavy, but not as heavy as the iPhone 14 Pro Max. The sides of the phone are curved, so when you're holding it, it actually feels pretty comfortable. The curved sides do make a difference, and it does make it easier to hold and utilize throughout the day. It does have boxy edges and corners, so that might be a nuisance, but it actually does make it easier to hold when you're just laying it on the bottom finger there. The S23 Ultra comes with a 5,000 milliamp battery, which is more than the iPhone 14 Pro Max, and it's likely the largest in the smartphone out there. Phone can also charge with a 45-watt power adapter, which means that this phone can actually charge pretty fast. And in fact, from 0 to 100, it can take less than 1 hour. A neat feature that came from Samsung's Galaxy Note models is that this phone now takes their pen. We call it the S Pen at Samsung. And what you can do is if I open that up, it actually opens up a writing or notepad and I can just start typing anything I want. For those who use let's say note apps or make lists throughout the day, instead of typing them out, you could actually just write it with this S Pen. It's pretty responsive and it's a lot better than I thought it would be. It is hidden within the phone, so it's not taking up space. It's not like an iPad where you actually have a magnetic strip on the outside of the iPad. It fits right inside, so you don't even know it's really there until you use it. All right, so now let's get to the camera. You notice at the back, there are so many different lenses. The main components of these new camera setup is that it does come with a 50 and a 200 megapixel camera lens, which is more than the iPhone 14 Pro out there and definitely one of the highest in the marketplaces today. The phone also records up to 8K 30 frames per second, which does take a lot of memory, but if you're trying to shoot those best moments very clear and crisp, that's one way to do it. One thing that Samsung phones and mainly the Galaxy ones are known for is its zoom. I compare the Samsung Zoom photos and also the iPhone 14 Pro Max zoom photos, you'll notice that the Samsung is much clearer and goes much further versus the iPhone, which actually distorts right away and it does not go as far as the Samsung lens. Here are examples of what each pictures look like. Also mentioned that there are two other models within the S lineup at Samsung. Visually, the size is the thing that you can pinpoint between the three models. It does have additional camera lenses, including that 50 and that 200 megapixel lens. The S23 Ultra screen also goes up to 1440p, whereas the S23 and the 23 Plus only go up to 1080p. This means that the Ultra will have a cleaner and crisper look, and it's going to be visually pleasing when you're scrolling through. Those who are looking at the 23 Ultra are likely looking at the iPhone 14 Pro Max. They are basically competitors. They're rivals, and we want to make sure that we're comparing these two. So when we're taking a look at both of these are some key differences that I want to call out. Just looking at these phones physically and holding them, you'll notice that the S23 Ultra has curved sides, so it's much easier to actually wrap it around your hand. Whereas the iPhone 14 Pro Max, it has flat sides, and it might be personal preference, but I actually feel like the S23 Ultra is easier to hold because of those curved sides. The iPhone 14 Pro Max does feel very premium. It does have stainless steel wrapped around it, so it is slightly heavier, but not by much. On the front, the Ultra has a cutout hole at the top, and that's the selfie camera, whereas the iPhone 14 Pro Max has the new dynamic island, which includes the Face ID sensor and also the selfie camera as well. It really comes down to personal preference. I really like the look of the cutout on the S23 Ultra. Personally, me, I do not use the dynamic island at all. I'm totally used to it and I barely notice it. So I do want to make sure that's noted. When it comes to the camera sets on both of these phones, the highest megapixel lens on the iPhone 14 Pro Max is 48, while the S23 Ultra has the 50 and the 200 megapixel camera. The 48 and 50 are likely to look very similar on both phones. 200 megapixel sensor might edge out both of those, but remember, it will take up more storage on your phone. So likely want to stick with that 50 or the 48s on both of these phones. When it comes to weight, it feels like the iPhone 14 Pro Max is much heavier than the S23 Ultra, but in fact, it's only 0.2 grams heavier. Not much of a difference, but I do feel it when I'm holding both. Totally personal preference, but even when I'm holding it in my hands, the S23 Ultra feels much better to carry. And this feels very bulky and heavy at the same time. Even though this one is slightly lighter than the iPhone 14 Pro Max, I think the curved sides do really help make it easier to hold and utilize throughout the day. Both of these phones' displays are actually made by Samsung, and Apple has done that for a few years now. When I'm looking at both though, the S23 Ultra definitely has the edge. It has the 1440p resolution, while the 1290p Resolution on the iPhone 14 Pro Max is slightly below, and when I'm scrolling through, the S23 Ultra is much better to scroll through. On paper, the iPhone does have a brighter display while it's outside because it can go up to 2000 nits, whereas the S23 Ultra can go up to 750 nits, which is higher than Apple's indoor 1600 nits on HDR content. The S23 Ultra has both 8GB and 12GB RAM options, whereas the iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max only have 6GB of RAM. I do actually want to point out things that I prefer on the S23 Ultra versus the iPhone 14 Pro Max. The first one is the fingerprint scanner. I actually prefer this over Face ID, like in bed or if my phone is across the desk. I don't have to go up to it and look at it completely. It's got a fingerprint sensor right underneath the screen, and I think that's very useful. The Ultra can actually charge much faster than the iPhone 14 Pro Max. It can leverage a 45-watt power adapter, whereas the iPhone 14 Pro Max can only use a 20. And continuing with charging, when I have this phone plugged in, it'll actually let me know how many minutes I have until the phone will charge to 100%. For some reason, I like this. I like planning by the minute when I'm going somewhere, planning my day. So for me, it actually gives me peace of mind knowing that my phone has either 30 minutes to go or it's only 5 minutes left, so I can just take it off and go. When it comes to screens, the S23 Ultra is second to none. As an Apple fanboy, I always used to preach how nice the Pro model phones looked on the Apple phones, especially the 13 and 14 because they have the 120 Hz display. But the S23 Ultra has proved me wrong. This 1440p display with 120 Hz is so amazing to scroll through and look at. Sometimes it feels like what I'm scrolling through is popping out of the screen. It's ridiculous, but you gotta test it out and see it for yourself. The S23 Ultra can charge your devices. And what I mean by that, I can charge my AirPods by placing it on the back of this phone. It has capability where it'll actually use the battery inside of its phone to charge other devices out there. The zooming capabilities and how clear the pictures are is just amazing. iPhones, they're distorted right away, and the quality of the images are just completely gone. And remember, I am an Apple fanboy, so I'm gonna point out just a few things and nitpicky things that I don't like about the Ultra. The Samsung Galaxy phones and all Android phones do not have iMessage on them. Basically, all of my friends and family and everybody I text and call have iPhones. I can only think of maybe 2 or 3 people in my life that don't have an iPhone. Those blue bubbles mean everything to me. So I'm not sure about you, but I don't like to see green. And the last thing I do not like about the Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra is the shutter lag when you're taking photos. It does take much longer than the iPhones, so when you're taking pictures of fast-moving objects, that's where you're gonna find the Apple iPhone wins out. Who is this phone for? I've gotta say, it takes the best pictures that I've ever seen. So if you're a photographer, I would definitely consider getting this S23 Ultra. It is a pretty large phone, but the screen is incredible to look at. The pictures are amazing. If you really want to use it for those capabilities, get the phone. If you're going to miss iMessage, then the iPhone 14 Pro Max is definitely a good replacement. And it's funny when I say replace it because it's the best iPhone out there on the market today. The S23 Ultra with its 50 and 200 megapixel cameras, along with its 1440p display, it's really tough to beat the experience on this phone. I think this is the best smartphone to buy in the market today. If it was slightly shorter, I would definitely consider it, but the no iMessage, too big of a phone to use, I'm out personally. So folks, are you a fan of the S23 Ultra? Let me know in the comments below. Hope you all found this video super helpful, and please remember to subscribe and like the video and stay tuned to more content. Thanks so much everybody, and see you on the next one.